Well, hello everyone. I am Michon and I wanted to explain a little bit more about Michón Con, how it works, and what all will be going on with that. So, the reason why I came up with this idea for Michón Con is because, I am a public speaker. Problem is, the world is not very accessible. I have several forms of chronic pain. I am most often a single parent. I have been impoverished for all of my life. And right now, especially, it's not as if the world has ever exactly been safe for me in general, but, I am black. And most people read me as a woman. And so, and when they find out other aspects of me that are not quite supported in this culture, it becomes a very unsafe place for me to be. And actually a few years ago, things got so bad that I was actually homeless for a few years. With two little ones and with my, chronic pain and everything, and just, it was just astounding the lack of help that I received. And I could actually feel myself dying at the end there, almost didn't make it. And I just happened to get really, really lucky that one of the people that have been following my work and my story offered me a home. And not only that, but, paid for me to actually get there. I ended up on the complete other side of the country, and they've also made sure that I am set up with other things that contribute to an actual real quality of life for me. So making sure that I can afford my medicines, making sure that I had a car to get around, and other things like that. Now, this doesn't exactly make them a saint. Obviously, there are still, they are white, so there are certain things that that can't really be understood about my experiences or things like that, and places where it's going to be a little, imperfect, obviously, because if you may have noticed, there's a huge thing going on in this country right now, with just understanding the legacy of this country and why it was founded, and just people are beginning to see that, things like slavery or civil rights is not in some distant past. It's still affecting everything right now. But unfortunately, not too many businesses or things, a lot of things are still kind of trying to go on like business as usual. And it's really it's really strange. So they're just, there's one side where all of these things are coming out. There's, especially with black non-men, speaking up about, creating things like, there's been more talk about intersectionality, which was created by Kimberly Crenshaw, queer black woman. There's Me Too movement, founded by Tarana Burke. There's Black Lives Matter, founded by queer black women. Not necessarily the ones that you see at the forefront of that, but still queer black non-men, and all of these other things that are unfortunately getting co-opted, usually by a lot of white women, which is interesting. But anyway, so there's that side of it with black non-men continuing to create spaces and language and movements. And then there's the people who sort of, I guess, want to pretend like none of this is happening and like none of this has any effect on anything else. So Right, so I'm a public speaker, right? So I get invited to speak at these conferences and conventions and things, and I am unique not only for the like number of things that I have expertise in, but the fact that I also have actual experience with a lot of the things that I'm talking about, which is something that a lot of, unfortunately, expertise has gone away from the experience portion of expertise, which is where it's really strange. So I have, usually both formal and experiential expertise with numerous things. And unfortunately, even though terms like accessibility and reparations and things like that are getting thrown around, there is, there's no such thing as trickle down. And unfortunately, people are only, this whole thing about inclusion and this idea of diversity is kind of slapped on like paint afterwards. And of course, paint crumbles and it's not part of the actual foundation. So unfortunately, I've had to, ended up missing a lot of opportunities because the people who hire me to speak don't actually want to pay me to speak, and not realizing how the ones I did make it to, I had to use, my own funds and pathetic resources to get to this point. When things aren't even, this culture is extremely stratified, and there is this complete lack of acknowledgement about what accessibility truly means. Accessibility has to account for, for poverty. Accessibility has to account for parenthood. Accessibility has to account for people who don't just, even though I use mobility devices like canes and wheelchairs and things like that, the reason I use it is different from, the ways that other people might use it. Accessibility does not just mean wheelchair accessible, because of course, if you have things like chronic pain or other issues, or if you're autistic or things like that, what are they doing to make sure that that's a safe space for that? And if you're Black and you're coming into this space, are they making sure that people are not being racially insensitive? Everybody's big on the trigger warning thing, but first of all, that's not how trigger warnings work. That's not what they're for. And also, there are no trigger warnings for racism, which is one of the largest issues, and which feeds all of the other isms that people face, feed into racism, or basically race compounds every and any other issue of oppression that you may face. And to remove race from these issues is to miss the entire point. And racism and ableism are very tightly bound, and they are inseparable. Because if you think back on the history of Black people, or even things that are happening now, you can understand that an entire race was disabled, was manually and purposely crippled and maimed and disabled. People don't often consider intergenerational trauma as a factor for things like PTSD or CPTSD or other mental health issues. And it's really unfortunate because, on the whole, genocide and, and mass rape and chattel slavery and, other things, that's going to have a pretty huge effect on your mental health, and it's going to have an effect on your actual genes. It's called epigenetics, and it's the things that happen to us during life, but it affects, our gametes and things like that in our, in eggs and sperm, and it's something that literally gets passed down in our blood and in our genes. That's the whole concept. But it's still not being widely considered, and this myth of separation is still being touted. But I want to change that. So for me, because there exists no space in the world for me by default, I have had to create spaces and times for me to exist. So I created Kill Fiction, which is a genre that actually deals with trauma and centers the experiences and lives of people who usually face enormous oppressions and things. And it's putting Black people especially back into science fiction and fantasy. Because if you look at a lot of those stories, there are stories. These are things that actually happen to us, you know, and it's very strange. So you have this this disconnect between them literally showing and making money off of stories of Black and Indigenous people, and then on the other hand not actually featuring our faces or having us be in charge of telling the stories. So you often get this really weird telling of what people would do in that situation when we're here and we've actually been through that situation. So we know, you know. Anyway, so yeah, so Kill Fiction basically puts all the experience back into the stories, and it focuses on you know, things like emotional literacy and anatomically accurate sex, and you know, alternatives to abuse culture. And I know you may hear me using some terms you may be unfamiliar with, and most of the terms that I've used, unless I stated that somebody else created them, I have created. These are my concepts that I developed. Like I said, I create. So things like abuse culture, ISTE, non-men and non-cis men, things like intersectional non-monogamy or integrated non-monogamy, integrated feminism, lots of other things. I literally have this huge list of language and things that I created. But of course, do you know this? And if you don't know this, why don't you know this? There's this fantasy of that somehow we respect creators and things like that, or that creators earn what their work is worth. I can assure you that's not true. For most of my life, I have survived on less than $20 a month. Currently, I earn about $300 a month and this is for all the work that I do. So not only am I a public speaker, but obviously I educate online about a number of issues, from LGBTQIA2S+, and I mean all of those fucking letters, not just lesbian and gay people, okay? I'm talking about the whole, you know, right, to, you know, disabilities, especially invisible disabilities, to education about autism, to education about truly, actually comprehensive sex education, to what I've termed contextual consent, to Black history, to how to write Kill Fiction, to communities of care, mostly through the lens of you know, aromanticism and things like that. So just, you know, just a whole bunch of things. I have written articles, a lot of nonfiction articles, because nobody was nobody was reading my fiction books. You know, it's not really out there, even though I've been writing it and fleshing it out for about 20 years now. So I mean, it's all in there. But of course, if you don't have that framework, it may not make sense to you, or you may not quite get the intent of a certain scene, or, you know, or something that happens in there. And so my nonfiction that I write is usually to break down some of these aspects that I introduce into the Qverse and build that framework around it. You know, for me, things are not separate, they are integrated. That's my goal. especially with the idea of metanoic elite theology, because it's about, the study of the truth. But it's also important how we study the truth, because it's like science. And there's this belief that science is automatically impartial and automatically benefits everyone equally, and there's no arguing with it. There's that myth of objectivity. But of course, as has been proven, if you grow up in a certain society or culture, not only will the things that you're interested in studying be different, but the ways that you study them will affect the results that you get. The observer effect, and it matters, because the beliefs you come in with, and just the fact that we're humans in general, means that our senses will only detect certain things. In our interpretation of the results that we get is going to be based on our very human brains and experiences. And, you'll see this with the whole science of, like drapetomania, and, all of this proof that Black people were somehow, deficient human beings. And there's that aspect of disability again. The entire notion of intelligence, the creation of it was in order to disable Black people as a race. Say, yes, we are. So all those terms that you hear, moron and retarded and all of that, were terms that were initially created and used for Black people. And so, so this is what I do. I put things together in all sorts of different areas, and I'm interested in figuring out, the entire integration of not only these systems of oppression, but in creating that integrated connection, so that all of this oppression doesn't, the point of oppression is to isolate and kill you, basically. That's the point, is to make you not exist. So obviously we need something to battle that, and that's my whole life's purpose, is to create concepts and spaces and content that battles that. Sorry, drinking my medicine here. Oh. Right. So, right, how does this feed into Michón Con? And why should you totally attend? Right. So, as I said, public speaker, I was not getting paid my worth. And funny thing is, even when I bring this up in certain spaces, the general consensus is that I don't deserve what I'm asking for, which is strange, because there are literally people out there right now who are making money using my terms or my concepts or other people's terms and concepts. And it's a shame. So how is that okay for them to profit off of my work and not acknowledge me or pay me for the use of that? It's very strange. We want the originator to, do we or do we not? Can you imagine? Oh, well, actually, we already had that happen in history with Edison and Tesla, right? Can you imagine Da Vinci and all of the work that he created and things like that, and then people, just grab some random guy off the street, just steals a bunch of his paintings and passes them off as his own. I don't know. Not that I'm equating myself with them, but just, that's kind of that, but that's still the level that says something about the culture that we live in, that's become the state. So, yeah. So there's two aspects to Michon Con. There's the reparational portion, because of course the reparational business model is something else that I created. So with everything that I do, there is a sliding scale, and it's based on, reparationality. So it's based on affordability, and race is it has to be a factor. And there's also this idea, of course, that people, whether or not they themselves want to come and benefit from it, they can make sure that people who cannot pay for it, or people who should not be paying for it, get to access it as well. because there's no point in only speaking to, you know, the freaking 1%. They have enough. They have more than enough, except the soul part of it and all the, you know, that emotional literacy and things, which is important. But still, it doesn't mean that their needs don't outweigh the oppression of the people who really need things like community and, you know, and reparations for just what happened to their ancestors. Like, you do realize we never got reparations for that, right? It was the slave owners who got paid money for losing us. I know it's really hard to, you know, but, and this is literally, most of us can go back only, and literally only a few generations, only a couple generations, and find family who were enslaved. And obviously the families that did the enslaving are still quite well off. And, you know, the racial wealth gap is still widening because of things like that, and because of things like redlining and, you know, Jim Crow, and, you know, just laws. There's still other laws today, and health issues, health disparities that factor into all of that. So Michon Con is about educating people on these things in an integrated and awesome way, giving people actual tools and plans for accountability and for, you know, ending abuse culture, or at least mitigating abuse culture, and for just, you know, general well-being. And so I have currently, I think, 15 different presentations / workshops, and people can actually vote on them. So if you want to vote on them, then go to the link that says vote on them. Because it's an interactive thing. You are involved in this process. It's not just something that I'm throwing at you. You know, and this is something that will happen several times a year. I will be putting on a Michon Con. And it's a virtual conference because, you know, a lot of us who are disabled cannot travel easily, cannot afford childcare, but we still deserve to have access to these things. And I think that's the saddest part, is that even conferences or conventions that claim to be about accessibility are just still woefully inadequate, or are still situated in these locations that are inaccessible, and don't have, like, they don't have accessibility guides that you can just go to and say, I need these things, or, you know, to make sure that there's no before care and there's no after care, which is something that's really, really important, you know, to make sure that the people who need those services can get them. So in this way, you know, it's going to be virtual, so people can just attend in their homes. They can step away if they need to. They can feel safe and comfortable. And obviously everything will also be recorded and things, and there will be everything will be captioned. There will be, you know, people who do sign language to do, you know, interpreting and things like that. And hopefully we can also get some translations into other languages and things, you know, so that it, you know, more people can participate. And it will also, and it will also be recorded. So even if you can't make it to the live sessions, you still will have access to it, and can watch it on your time afterwards, at least until the next event. People will be able to, you know, send questions and things. And so, right, there will be an accessibility team that helps to make sure that, you know, images are described and things like that. Now, there probably will be no trigger warnings because, as I've said before, people have the completely wrong idea about what trigger warnings are and what they are for. But as I've always done, I provide context around what I'm speaking on, why, and things like that. So, you know, that will be a thing. And I will probably also, you know, in one of the, at least one of the talks and presentations that that I will make is breaking down, you know, these trauma healing tools and getting back to the root of what they are and what we're looking for. Because healing, obviously healing can't happen unless you go through. The only way out is through, right? So, you know, the whole meaning of things like safe spaces, accountability, and even social justice are just co-opted and taken on by people who, you know, who abuse it. You can abuse anything because that's what abuse culture is. Everything it touches, it turns into a power imbalance, a power struggle, and it's really frustrating. Anyway, so one of the first things that I'll do coming up, I was supposed to do a book drive earlier this year. You know, and it was reparational. So people who could afford to, and especially white people, could purchase a copy of one of my books for black people, or people who, you know, basically people who wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise. Because access to information is also a matter of accessibility and resources, and something that isn't, you know, unfortunately isn't talked about enough. So anyway, this is the book, and this is also the title of one of my presentations. It's Aro, Eros, Eros, and as you can see, it is integrated non-monogamy, which was also formerly, you know, also known as intersectional non-monogamy. Yes, sweetheart. Yeah, parenting never ends. I don't get breaks off. It's both isolating and like being watched 24/7. So yeah, but that, you know, that's you know, obviously something else that I would talk about. But right, so yes, so I will set up another book drive for this, so people can also purchase one for themselves and someone else if they want to, or they can just purchase one for someone else. And it's going to be hard because I'm going to be doing it on my own, so all of it's going to be shipped here so I can sign it, and then I'll be the one mostly sending them out, which is going to use up a lot of energy and is going to make my plane flare up like nobody's business. But these are the things that people don't consider that are part of accessibility. But it's something I want to do. It's something that I feel is important. And so I'm going to find a way to do it. You can make that easier, of course, which I hope you do. By either buying tickets to Michón Con, or even, or, you know, contributing to the reparations part of it, or, you know, subscribing as well, to make sure that at the very least I can afford the extra medicines that I will need. And, you know, the extra things for self-care that I will require by doing this work. So yeah, it is something I'm primarily putting on myself. In part, so yes, it's literally a new kind of conference. Oh, how did I put it? Right, so yeah, don't be conned by the usual con. Come to Michon Con, and I put my name on it because if you make things accessible for me, it's already automatically, by default, going to be foundationally accessible to everyone else. And that's the whole idea about it, is you make accessibility as a part of the foundation from the ground up. So if you're including me, and actually including me, and not just as a token, it will already be great for everybody by default. So that's why my name is on it, so people cannot try to erase the work or the purpose like they do with all the other terms and things that I've created, or that other black non-men have created. So yes, the first one will take place in the beginning of June, hopefully, but it will only take place if all the funds are raised. So I am already discounting my rate for my speaker's rate to bring people not just one but 3 presentations / workshops that I will be doing, and it's something that will be done hopefully once every 3 or 4 months. But this part really depends on the community coming together and supporting me on this. You know, so yeah, take a look at the information, take a look at the site and poke around, and yeah, if you see something that you like or that you know somebody would benefit from, then make sure I can do that. So contribute in some way. And your contribution, it could be anything from volunteering to, you know, to contributing funds and other resources. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you all there. And oh, well, one thing somebody can do is please, 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 can somebody do captions for this video? Because YouTube kind of, especially with, you know, me using terms that are not exactly in the common lexicon, may butcher some of the things I'm saying. So I prefer to have a human or several humans listen and be able to type up the words for this so that it is truly accessible to people who, you know, to people who are deaf or people who have sensory processing disorders or things and need, you know, subtitles. So that's something that can happen. I thank you for watching this and for getting this far. I know it's a bit long, but I'm hoping that you find value in it. And I really, really hope to see you there, because I want Michon Con too. It's its own category of con, just like Kill Fiction is its own genre, just like integrative feminism is its own, you know, and just like intersectional non-monogamy is, you know, it's qualitatively different, and that is what I want to do, is make a qualitative difference and have a qualitative effect on the world. Because that's, I think, that's what's missing from a lot of things. And I've always valued quality over quantity. And this is part of why. So I don't even care if it's only a few people that show up to the first one, as long as there's still the resources to, you know, to continue doing this. And I want it to stick and transform lives. I don't want it to be just some, you know, some empty thing. I can't do that. I can't do that. Anyway, all right. So this is me officially inviting you to Michon Con and asking you to watch out for the Eros book drive. I have like over 20 books, but I'm going to start with that one because it can also be a little bit of an introduction to the kind of integration I'm talking about with my work. So it refers to a lot of my other books and some of my other work, but it's, you know, it might be a little better. Okay, sorry. I'm losing my words now because brain fog is a thing. So I'm going to go and take my medicine, and yeah. So please share this around. Please support, and thank you, thank you, thank you. See you soon.